Hi, welcome to the Career Sprints YouTube channel. My name is Rohit and we like to produce videos that help you with your professional development and continuous learning. Now, in this video, I want to talk about how communication management is handled in an agile project versus a traditional setup. Right now, before we go on to talk about the differences between communication in these two approaches, let's understand the meaning of communication. Now, when we talk about communication, it is something that is needed in every facet of our life. We need communication in our personal lives. We also need communication in our professional lives. When we are able to communicate more openly, more frankly, more effectively with people around us, we generally leave a better impression of ourselves on the people that we interact with, and also we are able to resolve a lot of problems or a lot of issues through our ability to communicate. In fact, communication becomes even more important in a project because a project is a time-bound endeavor at the end of which we produce something of value which can in turn earn us a profit, right? So when we are going to spend money and time and resources in a project, we need to ensure that communication happens rapidly, communication happens smoothly, and it leads to better coordination amongst team members so that it benefits the project overall. Now, another thing about communication is that communication happens in several different ways. So communication can be formal communication, which is basically through documents, like plans that are produced in a project, or maybe through reports. Communication can also be informal communication. This could be conversation that happens in a meeting, or this could be conversation that is not necessarily documented, but it happens in a project to get things moving in a project. Now, when we talk about communication in Agile, we need to draw our attention to principle number 4, 6, 7, and 10. Now, if you look at principle number 4 and if you look at principle number 6, you can pause the video and you can read them. You would notice that principle number 4 and 6 focuses on communicating daily and communicating on a face-to-face basis, right? So Agile communications have a preference for frequent communication, and they have a preference for co-location and face-to-face communication rather than communicating through chat or communicating through email or through any other form of communication which is not as active or not as explicit as face-to-face communication. Now, if you look at principle number 7 and 10, you would see that principle number 7 basically talks about working software is the primary measure of progress. So if you've read the Agile Manifesto, one of the key elements that really jump out in the manifesto is that they say that they value working software over comprehensive documentation. So traditionally, in many projects, documentation has been given a lot of importance, and maybe at that time, in some projects it made sense to do all this documentation, but over a period of time, they have started realizing that we are spending way too much time doing elaborate plans and reports, but we are failing to produce the results that we wish to produce, which is working software or a working solution. So Agile is basically not saying that documentation is bad, and we do communicate through documents, but Agile is saying that be minimalistic and be simplistic when it comes to producing documentation. So keep it simple, keep it direct, keep it more visual, and focus on producing working software, because we are not going to use the documentation, we are going to use the software to solve a problem or to make our customers happy. Now, let's look at how communication really differs in predictive projects versus agile projects. So if you look at what's written under predictive, it basically goes on to say that no special effort is being put for in-person conversation by team members. So traditionally, when we've been doing project management, or, when we use waterfall style project management, we've noticed that a lot of communication can happen through passive methods of communication, such as, for instance, email or maybe even chat, right? Now, although these methods of communication can be effective, but they are relatively slow, and there is a huge chance of miscommunication or misinterpretation, especially when you're communicating via email, because what I may be trying to say, I may not be able to communicate that very effectively in words through email, and the person on the other end may perceive it differently, right? But when we replace email communication, for instance, with more face-to-face communication, we are able to read the person's tone, we are able to read the person's body language, and obviously we are able to answer questions much more rapidly. And that's why, face-to-face communication is one of the best ways to communicate and is the preferred way to communicate in the world of Agile. Also, one of the things that you need to understand is that in the world of Agile, it actually forces frequent communication, right? And the way it forces frequent communication is through, for example, like a daily stand-up where team members meet for 15 minutes every single day, and they discuss issues, they discuss any impediments, they talk about what has been done so far, what will be accomplished during the day. So in a way, Agile projects really force face-to-face communication. Now, let's look at the second point of difference between predictive and agile projects when it comes to communication. So in predictive projects, there is a high value on documentation. So we are basically producing maybe elaborate plans and reports and records that we are maintaining. And in reality, if you look at these plans and these reports and these records that we maintain, they don't really help anyone in the organization. Maybe it could be relevant to a few stakeholders, but the question is that the amount of time and effort that you invest in producing these documents and these elaborate plans, is it really worth it? Like, are you really getting any kind of return by doing all this documentation? Can we not be more simplistic or minimalistic about producing some plans and reports? Produce it in a way which could be more visual, which could be which would be easy for people to see and understand, and it would enable quick communication as well. So if you look at agile artifacts, agile artifacts are very few. You have a product backlog, you have a sprint backlog, maybe you would have an impediment log at most, and you have the increment, which is basically not necessarily a document, but it's actually a working artifact that you show to someone and you get feedback about it. So agile communication really focuses on taking out the fluff from the documentation and keeping it minimalistic. So for example, you can use a Kanban board, you can use a physical Kanban board where you basically take a poster, you draw a couple of columns there, and you present the tasks or the user stories that you're building in a visual manner, right? So and that you can just place it anywhere, in an obvious area in your office where anyone who walks by can actually look at the Kanban board and get an at a glance update of what's really happening in the project. So in the world of Agile, the question is not about the volume of documentation that you do. Obviously, we do want to reduce the volume of documentation that we do, but it's a question of appropriateness. So Agile is not saying that, okay, we are doing, let's say 100 documents in a traditional setup. Now let's bring it down to 10. If you need to do all those 100 documents, fair enough, do those 100 documents, but ask yourself, do we really need 100 documents to communicate all this information? Can it not be done in a simpler manner? So that's the second point of difference between predictive and agile projects. Now, the third point of difference between predictive and agile projects is that in the world of predictive, team members are actually maybe expected to attend a lot of meetings. Now, some of the meetings may be totally useless and you don't really need to even be there in those meetings. Maybe you're not even contributing in those meetings. You're just there for the sake of some stakeholders' satisfaction or happiness to be in that meeting. Whereas what Agile does is that it cuts out, like the way it cuts out fluff in documentation, it also cuts out all the fluff in meetings as well. So Agile meetings are, meant to be kept quick, they're meant to be minimalistic, and there are a few meetings that you actually do in Agile. For example, in the world of Agile, you do primarily 4 meetings, which is the sprint planning meeting, the daily scrum or the daily stand-up meeting, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. And if you want, you can add another meeting, which is called a product backlog refinement meeting. Apart from these meetings, there is no other meeting really that's necessary in the world of Agile. So if I were to take an example, because we are meeting every day during the daily stand-up for 15 minutes, and we are talking about progress and about issues and how some of these issues can be solved, we don't necessarily need to meet over and over again throughout the rest of the day and sit in unnecessary meetings to really try and solve a problem, because we are accomplishing that when we meet for those 15 minutes during the daily stand-up. So As you can see, communication in Agile versus Predictive focuses on more face-to-face communication, doing minimal documentation, keeping meetings to a minimum and keeping them simple, keeping them direct, also using communication methods which could be more visual, which could be also give you at a glance update on what's really happening in a project. So whenever you're doing documentation or whenever you're planning a meeting, ask yourself, does this meeting or this document really make sense if we want to use the Agile mindset, or do we really need this? And if the question is no, then eliminate it. So that's the primary difference in communication between Predictive and Agile projects. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write them in the description of this video. And if you like this video, you know what you should be doing. Please go and hit that like button. When you do that, this video reaches so many other people such as yourself who may benefit from understanding these differences. Additionally, watch out for new videos that we produce on a weekly basis, and you will get notified if you hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much. Also, quickly before you leave, I wanted to talk about this free PMP virtual class that we conduct a couple of times in a month. Now, in this free class, we actually pack a lot of useful information that will help you with cracking the PMP exam in the first attempt. Some of the information relates to the changes that have been made to the exam in 2021, any books and resources that you can use to prepare for the exam, any pitfalls that you can avoid while preparing for the exam, and obviously all the steps that you need to take to get this certification in your first try. In fact, we also teach one chapter from the PMBOK in this class. So if you're interested in this class, please go ahead and register using the link in the description below. Also, I wanted to talk about this Udemy course that we have created on the Agile Practice Guide. Now, greater than 50% of the PMP exam is now Agile, so understanding the Agile Practice Guide becomes super critical for your PMP exam prep strategy. In fact, this is the only course on Udemy that is based on the Agile Practice Guide, and it has razor-sharp focus on what you need to know from an Agile perspective for the exam. So use the coupon code in the description of this video and get this course at a discount on Udemy. Finally, I'd also like to make an important announcement. Very soon, we are going to have an in-class workshop that talks about the PMP exam psychology. In this class, we'll help you develop the mental muscle that is needed to tackle tricky questions in the PMP exam, just like a pro. This workshop will be for 10 to 12 hours, and we'll help you develop the right mindset to crack this exam. And we are going to do this at a cost which is going to be extremely reasonable. So while we are working on the webpage for this class, if you're interested in it, please shoot us an email at info@careersprints.com and we'll send you over the information about this class and how you can join it. Thank you so much for watching this video. We wish you all the best for the PMP exam.